Greetings, I am at chess.com playing the chess bot Arjun, rated 2300, and run into, this is kind of an unorthodox game, and if you hang with me to the end, I think you'll see some really neat things. The computer, who certainly knows better than I do, says that I make a handful of blunders. However, that is right at the beginning of me turning the game around and becoming into my favor. And so I think I realize why the computer says that I'm making some blunders, but I also think it's important for the idea that I have. There's probably a better way that I'm not quite seeing, but I'll show you what worked for me for this bot Arjun. And he uses the King's Pawn Goldsmith defense, and I've seen it a handful of times, and honestly I didn't even know the name of this opening until after this game. Then I had to, investigate a little bit, but it's kind of an unorthodox opening. And sometimes I feel like with some of these bots, when you start getting in around the 2300, if you play a traditional game, traditional opening, just everything by the book, I feel like these bots will punish you for it. And so with this game, I tried to get a little creative, and it gives me ideas about future games, and hopefully it gives the audience some ideas. And so let's take a look at this. Okay, so there's some really cool stuff that happens towards the end of this game that I want to show you, so hang with me, and we'll take a look at that. So I open with the old classic E4, and this is that unorthodox opening. Like I said, I didn't even know the name of this opening. I've seen it half a dozen times, but then I checked it out after this game and kind of had some aha moments and seeing. But when you're playing a 2300 like this Arjun here, you have to be careful. Just assume it's a trap, and it definitely threw me off. But I just was like, well, I'm going to play, some good clean chess and really keep my senses sharp and make sure I'm not falling for any of the traps, and don't get greedy. That's a lot of times, is, oh, it looks like a free piece hanging out there. That's usually part of the trap. Okay, so here I want to show you this just because this is 2300 is very difficult for me, and the computer says this is an accuracy. Okay, and I normally don't bring the bishop here to attack the knight, but I thought, well, I'll show you what I do here. A lot of people might frown on that, and I normally don't play that line, but I like messing up the pawn structure of my opponent here. And so that was my motivation. Usually at 2300, I got to be honest, I'm looking for any kind of little advantage and then try to get to an end game and then, even it out. As in, that little advantage gives me the advantage towards the end game. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. I look for any kind of advantage, even if it's just up a pawn or something. So here, because I don't have the white squared bishop anymore, I liked the idea of this pawn structure here. And I know the computer says, this was a good move, but the best was to come up here. And, the computer knows better than I do, but this is usually what I do in this line is, I like this pawn chain. I don't have my white squared bishop anymore, so I'm not too concerned about this. But sometimes I do like to, like if I'm losing the, or if I have lost, the white squared bishop, I'll try to play the queen on the white squares as long as everything's equal. There's nothing dangerous about the white squares or something like that. Okay, so let's get to it because I want to do some stuff here. And yeah, I thought about kicking that out as well. But obviously I guess that's what I should have done first. But okay, so I show you one thing that I'm not very pleased with myself for doing right here. So here, if I do an exchange, if I take the queen, all I'm doing is helping my opponent develop a knight. In most games, if they're evenly matched, only last about 42 moves on average. And so if I'm just spinning a turn, like in this, I'm kind of like, it's almost like I'm wasting a turn because the queens are off the board and I've helped my opponent develop a knight. So that's not good for me, so I'm not willing to do this exchange. And then here's where I was hoping, and that's terrible tactic in chess, and I always try to tell people don't ever use hope as a tactic. And so now here I'm guilty of it, but I'm going to expose myself that, yeah, I made that mistake. So I was wanting that queen exchange, and then just kind of like the reverse tactic, what my opponent was just trying on me. Then now I have a bishop developed instead of just sitting at this bottom rank. And so that's what I was shooting for. That's why I did move the queen there. Definitely better moves I could have done, but it works out. So now I'm kind of forced to do this exchange. And it ends up happening anyway. So, yeah, I thought I'd take a chance, but, in hindsight, it was kind of ridiculous, especially at 2,300. Yeah, they're going to see that. So, okay, so let's get to it. And here I want to show you again what my tactic is, and it does pay dividends here in the future. So I'm in check. I'm in check right here, and right there. So I got to deal with that, obviously. So deal with that, and then here's what I was after. Was this, and the computer even says it's an inaccuracy. And I'm sure there's better ways to do this. I'm just doing it the way that I feel comfortable, so you, the audience, can take that for whatever it's worth. And what I'm after is this. So here's the thing. And this is kind of like the thing. Okay, so we're even. Like I've got 2 major and 1 minor. My opponent has 2 major and 1 minor. But the reason why I feel like I have the advantage, and the computer says I have a slight advantage as well, and that is because my opponent has, we're dead even as far as points go, but my opponent has 2 double stacked pawns, and look at this really pretty pawn structure that I have. That's nice. And I normally like to save the bishops for the end game versus the knight as we approach the end game here. However, in this situation, I feel like I've got so much material pawns on the white squares that I just tell myself, okay, dark squared bishop, stay off the dark squares. And the knight can freely hop around wherever. So this is what I was talking about early on, where I said I'm just looking for some kind of advantage getting into the end game, which would kind of give me the edge, especially because 2,300, I know that I'm not going to be able to just set up some ridiculous trap that it falls for or something like that. I'm just going to get myself in trouble trying to even do that at a 2,300. Okay, so here I realize, and you'll see too here in just a moment, is I didn't want this. I was afraid that this bishop was going to end up here and threaten this knight. I should have just let it happen, and I should have got this rook into a better spot. And then it'd be on a light square, so no threat of this bishop here. My rook would not be in threat of this bishop sitting on this light square. So totally should have done that. Overlooked it in the game, and so now I have an attack on my knight, obviously. And so again, I could have went ahead and done this move here again, but I chose to. What I'm trying to do here is get isolated pawn. There's one isolated pawn here at the edge, and I'm very happy that my opponent has that. I'm trying to get this situation to be an isolated pawn is what I'm after here. Okay, so now here, I tell you what I was thinking, and the computer says I make a series of blunders afterward. Now, this was not a good move. I am not going to try to defend this. My logic was I wanted to defend this pawn, and I really had in my sights of making these isolated pawns some way here. And so, I thought this was a good move. It does create a danger in the fact that my king is boxed in, and there are rooks. My opponent has rooks on the board here, so that's definitely something you need to be watching out for. And so that is why the computer says, hey, that's a blunder. Plus my rooks were connected and now they're not. And so, yeah, that was something. I should have just left this situation there and started working this situation here. And so I want to show you where the computer says it's a blunder, and I'll tell you why. So, okay, so now I'm starting my isolated pawn tactic here. Okay. So there's that. And then I take, and so now, and I realize the computer says it's a blunder, but I'll show you why. You've probably seen it now anyway. But so I am up a pawn, and I've got an isolated pawn up against the board, isolated pawn, double stack pawn. So what I'm looking to do now is just trade down as much as possible. I want to trade this down. It's kind of like if you're in some kind of silly contest. This is the way I think of it, and maybe it'll help you, where you're throwing apples at each other, you and an opponent, and you each start off with a bushel of apples, and you have the exact amount, and you get down to where you have one apple left and your opponent has no apples left, which is how this game ends. Obviously, the one who can hang in there with that last apple is going to win. So that's kind of the idea you need to think of about in this situation, trading down. Now my opponent should not be wanting to trade down at this point. And the reason why the computer says this is a blunder is because my king here is in trouble, because if a rook ever ends up in this bottom rank, if I don't have some way to defend it, it's mate, game over for me, because this knight is blocking this rook from getting into the action. So okay, and same situation here. The computer, it's kind of interesting because the computer puts my opponent up so much. Now, I didn't have this analysis when I was playing the game, but I thought if it was analyzed, the computer would have put me way ahead, is what I was thinking. In my mind, I still am doing great, because I do know about this weakness, and at any moment I can get my knight, back out of the way, and now this weakness is defended with this rook here. Okay, so I'm very much aware of that weakness, but I'm taking a little bit of a gamble, because I shouldn't really use the word gamble, but I can see that I can get out of trouble very quickly. Kind of a dangerous way to live here, but okay. So now, like I said, trading down. Okay, so now watch, here's what happens. So this is kind of the danger that I was talking about. I'm sure everybody can see it now. If it goes there, it's mate. So now I have to deal with this knight. Okay, so, and now I bring it right back, and that's why it was originally a blunder to begin with, because ultimately I have to bring it back right where it was. So it's almost like I gave up a turn. Okay, so let's keep this going, because it does get pretty interesting here. So he's bringing that piece down, and so now I take it. And I want to show you something where I took a little bit of a gamble here. Now, okay, so I realized this pawn could get snatched, and then if I don't do something about it, I could lose this knight and all these pawns very quickly. But I see an idea to promote this pawn, and so that's what I go for. The reason why I came here is I want to stop that bishop at all costs. If that's what I'm going to commit myself to doing, I have to at all costs stop that bishop from coming here and owning this diagonal so that I can get my queen. And so that's what I go for. Here in a minute, I leave my knight hanging. Okay. All in hopes of getting this queen. Again, computer says it's a blunder. Okay, I confess I'm going to take a closer look at this. Maybe there was a better way to go about it, but anyway, this is the path that I chose. I was trying to make this under 20 minutes, so I better keep talking a little faster and keep going. Okay, so there I am, and bishop takes the knight, and here's where I wonder if I should have done things a little differently. Is I actually push up the pawn, and now here I really expected bishop to take the rook. Didn't happen. Okay, so at this point I'm thinking as long as I play clean and don't mess up, I should have this won now at this point. Okay, so here I almost wonder if we go back, I wonder if I should have protected this piece or tried to at least save it in case I messed something up. But I was looking at that and I was thinking maybe there's something that I'm missing. And so I knew if I could queen over here, I should win this with just good chess fundamentals at that point. So rather than chancing that I'm not seeing something, I did leave that out there just to kind of draw fire away from me queening. So that's the path I chose. Maybe I could have saved that rook. I'm not sure. I'm going to go back and look at that a little closer. But I did not want to mess up my ability to get a queen and my probable ability to get a second queen. So anyway, let's keep this going. So there's the queen. And this pawn, I wanted to stay right there, and there was nothing I was going to do to move it because that blocked. That bishop was going to have to, come all the way around, come up here, come here, before it can guard this square. Too much time. That's takes my opponent too much time to get in that position. So, okay. So let's keep this going here because I want to show you some neat stuff. So I realize that this queen is going to be under attack. My opponent does not like this queen sitting there. So I want to show you something, what my opponent is trying to get me to do. So what Arjun is trying to get me to do is get my king somewhere like, let's just say here, stepping in front of the queen, but to where I can't use my king to take. So there's like this rank in between us. So Arjun wants to sit here for check, if my king was here, and then it captures the queen. Oops, so sorry about that. So if I was sitting here with the king and Arjun sits here, then when I get out of the way, it takes care of my queen. So I'm very much aware of that, and I'm not going to let my opponent have that opportunity. However, there is a trick to it, and I'll show you, and you'll see it here in just a minute. Okay, now here, this is what I'm talking. It's a little bit different because he's just one rank behind me. So if he wants to step here, sure, go for it, and I'll be glad to take that off your hands, that rook off your hands. So, okay, so now let's go back and look at this. So now I have to be careful because now there's two rungs in between us. And two ranks in between us. Sorry, I'm looking at focusing on the pieces too much. So I have to be careful because the two ranks in between us, 2 and 3, I could lose my queen if I'm not careful here in this position. So Try to keep it. Now I have stepped in front of the queen, but that's okay because I'll just retake, and then I still have this to queen, and I still have this blocking the bishop to reach this square. So this bishop, thanks to its own pawn, cannot stop me from queening there. So, okay. So I have stepped in front of the queen. And there it is for check. So I have to deal with that. I get out of the way. And yep, there it is. I lose my queen. And now I get it back. Okay. So now there's a few more things. If you've seen some of my other videos, I try to cut off the king. Now, this pawn owns this square. I don't want this king to be free. I want to try to push it up and trap it. So that's why I chose to drop the queen back, forcing the pawn back up. And I got to get my king into the action. So many times in the endgame, it's easy to try to tuck your king away somewhere safe, but king could be a powerful piece. You got to use it. Okay, let's keep this going here. Okay, so now the king is cut off. Try to move a little closer, get something going. Okay, now I don't want the king to, step back here. So that's why I went up here, trying to cut off again. Like I said, keep pushing that king up. Okay. Now I've got to be aware of these pawns and do something with these pawns because they're powerful coming down. And so I'm thinking, I own all of this file here. So the king is cut off. I'm mostly free to get another queen. Okay, so here I'm like trying to get the king, my opponent's king, out of the action. Okay, so now I'm going to have double queen and it's going to be over. So my opponent has to sacrifice the bishop. I don't want to keep cutting my king off. So I retake with the king. And the reason why I felt like that was the better move is because it keeps my king in the action and not further away. Okay, so these pawns can be dangerous, but it shouldn't be a problem with proper chess techniques. There's check, has to be dealt with. King's now is officially cut off, so now I'm just cleaning up pawns at this point. Okay. Now there's one thing I want to show you. So let's see here. Where's my opponent go? Right there. Okay, so my king owns these three squares here. So now I want that king stuck on the A file is what I'm looking to do here. So now all I gotta do is move in, make this box for my opponent's king smaller and smaller. So now my opponent has no choice but to go to the A file. Okay, and then so now my opponent's trying for a stalemate, so be careful. Make sure your opponent always has a square to move to, that you're not gonna be stuck in a stalemate here. And so now it's pretty much over, and there it is. So I hope that helps. The biggest takeaway from this is, it was an unorthodox opening. It made me a little nervous. I only see it once in a while. Like I said, I didn't even know what the name of it was at the time when I saw it. So, be prepared to maybe respond with some unorthodox things. The thing I did with the knight and it closed up that bottom rank, that was a little too daring. It actually worked for me, but it was a blunder on my part originally. So it's always a forcing move, because then I was forced to move it at some point when it would have been best just to leave it where it was the whole time. But look for the biggest, the next biggest takeaway is look for a little advantage. And once you get that little advantage, just keep trading down. So reversely, If you've lost a piece or a pawn structure or something, you don't want to trade down. Stick to your good chess fundamentals and hang in there. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope that helps.